Okay, we'll continue the next two Sa'ifim of Siman Kuf Tzadik Aleph, Sif Gimel and Sa'if Daled, which with that we finish Siman Kuf Tzadik Aleph. The Mechaber starts by saying that the shtaris in today's day and age are not shtari raya, they are shtari kinyan. That means shtaris which are used for the purpose of effectuating a kinyan and purchasing a property. And the Rama explains, what does it mean to the shtari kinyan? That the land is purchased with these shtaris. The kinyan is done with these shtaris unless there is a specific agreement, condition between them that these shtaris are not going to be for a kinyan, and then it becomes a shtari raya, which is exactly the opposite of what the Torah writes, that today's shtaris are shtari raya, and which means not shtari kinyan. And the Beis Yosef right away says on the Torah, bunch of Rishonim would say that the shtaris are shtari kinyan, not shtari raya. That means that the shtar does create the kinyan, and it's not only a proof that a kinyan has happened. And the Darkei Moshe over there on the Beis Yosef says the same thing that he says over here. If there's a condition that it's not going to be a shtar kinyan, but only a shtar raya, then it becomes a shtar kinyan and not a shtar raya and not a shtar kinyan. The Beis Yosef over there adds in the name of the Rashba that if it's a shtar which was made by the Goyish government, means a legal shtar, it works. Any regular shtar that's done for the purpose of purchasing is considered a shtar kinyan, and it works. That's what it brings from the Rashba. And he says, V'kol shekain, in today's day, the Beis Yosef says, when the shtaris have specific lashonos of mechira, and not just that it's a shtar that's usually used for mechira. If you look in the first k'tzas, the k'tzas does ask a question, asks a bunch of questions on this. I'm not going to get into the k'tzas now, asks the questions on this Rashba. How could it be that these shtaris, a shtar mecher, which is done by the goyim, works? And he brings a couple of rayas why it doesn't work, and he says maybe because of the machlosa. That's how he leaves it. Sorry, yeah. The Dvara Mishpat brings, and Sifkot Yud Aleph brings from Shal Sechuvas Meleches Shloime Kimchi, that he proves from the Rashba Farket. He says we have a Rashba earlier in Choshen Mishpat that Beis Yosef brings, that shtaris ha'olos berkosh goyim are only raya. So, and the Meleches Shloime leaves it hanging. He says it doesn't have an answer. Why over here it's mashma from the Rashba that shtaris mecher that are made by goyim work. And earlier in the Choshen Mishpat, the shtaris which are made by the goyim only serve as a raya. We're talking about the shtaris for raya. And the Chochma and the Dvara Mishpat says that even though the Chochma Shloime didn't give an answer, he has an answer. And the answer is, he says that the shtar, what the Rashba is talking about in the other place, that a shtaris their value is only mitzad raya, is not a contradiction to over here. Why? Because every shtar mecher that's done by the goyim is a shtar raya, and therefore your koine, you take title of the property based on this, and this is a raya that you took title of the property. It's not that in one place suddenly the shtar becomes a shtar raya, and over here it's a shtar kinyan. Here it's also not a shtar kinyan. The fact that the Rashba says it works mitzad that it works, that you could take title for it. But how do you take title for it? It proves that you had the right to take title to it for whatever other reason that happened over there. So it's not a shtar kinyan, that you effectuate a kinyan with the shtar by the Kodesh Goyim, but it's rather a shtar raya that proves that you had a right to acquire this property. Then the Beis Yosef continues, and over here the Beis Yosef has the marking is Daled 2. There's a Daled 1 we're going to get to later. That if someone bought with a shtar, and then it tells someone bought with a shtar, and the seller tells the buyer you're acquiring it after 30 days, then it only works if he says, Me'achshav, the shtar says that this land is yours in 30 days, and then if the shtar gets lost, what happens? So if you say Me'achshav, then you're kind of regardless of whether if you have a shtar or not. And if you didn't say Me'achshav and the shtar got lost, then being that the shtar is a shtar kinyan, and you don't have the shtar in your hands, then you cannot acquire it after 30 days. Now, when the Darkei Moshe quotes this, he quotes it, adds a word, he says, just with a shtar or money, and then he says, if it's me'achshav and you lost it, it still works. If it's not me'achshav, then it doesn't work. Right away comes the Drisha, Agoy's Drisha Prisha, and says, I don't understand. It's clearly mashma from Taisvus that if it's with money, then you don't have to say me'achshav. If the money is given and the condition is that you're going to acquire it in 30 days, then even if you don't say me'achshav, in 30 days you acquired it the moment the money is transferred, and you don't have to start saying, well, if the money got lost, you didn't acquire it, you did acquire it, because that's the question. What happens if the seller loses the money in between? Did the kinyan happen or not? And if you look in the Ramah over here in Sif Daled, he actually brings exactly what he wrote in the Darkei Moshe Orech, that if whether shtar or mois, if you say me'achshav, it works. If you don't say me'achshav, it doesn't work. And the Smeh, the same one as Drisha Prisha, I'm sure you know that by now, he also says over here the same thing that it's written before, that I don't understand how this can work. There's no reason to say that by mois you also have to say me'achshav, and the Smeh gives a dechak diketeretz, the Shach also gives a dechak diketeretz, and the Taz says, let's the dechak diketeretz we can put on the side. Here's a good teretz. What's the teretz of the Taz? What are we talking about over here? When is it talking about? What's the Ramah talking about? It's not talking about a general case that if you use mois, if you use money, you have to say me'achshav for 30 days, and if not, it doesn't work. And not that if it's only shtar, you have to say me'achshav and it doesn't work. It's talking about a very specific location. A location where you could purchase, the minhag is to purchase either with money or with a shtar. And therefore the halacha in such a place is that you need both. And if you don't have both, it doesn't work. And therefore, in such a scenario, if either of them 30 days, we have a problem. It's each place goes according to. So, and there's no way that the kinyan would be able to be done without both. If it's only shtar, then only shtar is the thing that you need. If it's only mois, it doesn't. He says it's obviously the mashmos of the Taz is if it's only a place where you only buy with money without a shtar, then there wouldn't be a problem. And that's how he explains the Ramah. So he shows the big question that Balaitur has, that the Balaitur has, that it's a beferish Taisvus, that when it comes to money, you don't have to say me'achshav. And still he says, this is a good teretz, the Taz says, but still he ends with a tzarechiyun on the Ramah, even on this explanation. The Knesset Agdoila, Nagoyes Beis Yosef Ois Choftes, right away points out, he says, what are we talking about over here? What is the Beis Yosef talking about over here? He's talking about, obviously, a shtar kinyan. Yeah, common sense. When do we say that you have to keep the shtar for 30 days? And if you don't say me'achshav, it's obviously talking only about shtar kinyan. Because that is what is going to create the kinyan. And if you don't have it, and you don't say me'achshav, then if you don't have the shtar at the moment that the kinyan is supposed to happen, then you have nothing to be kinyan with. But if it's a shtar raya, you don't need it. Because a shtar raya proves that a kinyan was done. It's not the act of a kinyan that's done with it. And the Knesset Gdolah adds further, and even according to the Marashdam, who doesn't agree with the Beis Yosef's global statement that all shtaros today are shtaros kinyan, even he will still hold that in such a scenario where you lost the shtar raya, he has to bring it. And therefore, if you lost the shtar raya according to within the 30 days and there was no me'achshav, it seems like the Marashdam's idea is that the buyer is going to have to prove that it happened. The Marshal has a goes on the tour. And the goes of the Marshal on the tour were printed in the back of your tour. In the tour Shulchan Aruch that you have. Right after the tour ends, before the Shulchan Aruch, you have a Kovetz Mefarshim over there. The goes of the Marshal are there, some of them, whatever they're able to find. It's the first page of the Kovetz Mefarshim in the tour. And over there he writes on this tour, and he says, because we know the tour says that all shtaros are shtaros raya, not shtaros kinyan. So he says what the tour says, that today's shtaros are shtaros raya. He says that is the tour is trying to tell you that if you want to use the shtar for kinyan, it's not going to work. That's what the Torah is trying to tell you. But if it's a place where you write shtaros, but the kinyan is done by money, and the shtar's purpose is a shtar raya, and not a shtar, and you don't want to use it as a shtar kinyan, then the kinyan is done when you get the shtar. Why? Because what we explained previously, all boils down to some chadaitoi. So if in a place where you only write a shtar, the Torah says it's not enough. You can't make a kinyan with only a shtar. But if it's a place where it's payment plus a shtar, so the payment makes the kinyan, but the moicher is not comfortable until the moicher and the kohen has no smichus das until the shtar is signed. So in such a place, the kinyan ends when the shtar is written. And then that shtari raya works. It doesn't create a kinyan, it finalizes the kinyan. The Mata Shimon has an interesting idea on the whole thing on the Torah. He says, the Mata Shimon Agoyes HaTorah Ois Yud Aleph says, what's the Torah telling you that there's shtari raya? He's not telling you it doesn't work. He's telling you, look at it from a different perspective. It's not a shtar that creates a kinyan. It's a shtar eidah. So, Take, the shtar did not create because the proof as a land. So there's no between or you understanding the shah. And there's a payment in Sivdal, which we're going to get to soon. This, the Mata Shimon continues over there, and goes to Reis Yud Beis. What happens if a husband writes to his wife a shtar? And what's the shtar says? You brought in $500,000 and you brought in half of the house. That's what you brought into the marriage. What? For the purpose of nichse milug, you should know what she owns, what she walks out with. So over there he brings the Matashimin, over there brings the name of the Rashbash, Siman Reish Samaches, that this is not even a shtar raya. A shtar raya, he says, is only when it comes from the moicher. The moicher says, confirms that a kinyan was made to transfer ownership. When a husband writes a piece of paper to his wife, it doesn't confirm a transfer of ownership. It's not even a raya. It's nothing. The shtar has no real value. Now, what you have the Beis Yosef, that the Beis Yosef says, the next piece of Matashim, the Beis Yosef says that today's shtar is a shtar raya, not shtar, a shtar kinyan, not shtar raya. Beis Yosef says, not so fast. It's a pluk to the Rabvasa. We have machlekes rishonim. And you can't just brush off the Rosh. He says, yes, somebody wants to say that the Rosh is Das Yachid. It does not like that. He brings a bunch of people that support the shit of the Rosh. So it's a machlekes rishonim. And if it's a machlekes rishonim, whoever's a muchzak could say kimli. Now in Oisid Beis of Hagoy's Beis Yosef of the Matashimon, he brings the name of Michtam LeDavid, Choshen Mishpat Siman Tezvav, that a different explanation than what the Tur says, that all shtaris are shtar raya. He says it doesn't mean the simple understanding that you think all shtaris are shtar raya means that you can't do anything with it. No. He's talking about shtaris that write in them that there was another kinyan made. Kinyan agav sudar or whatever other kinyan. That means not a shtar that confirms payment. A shtar that confirms a different kinyan. And therefore, that shtar doesn't create a kinyan because a kinyan was already made. So obviously it's not going to create a kinyan. But if the shtar is made for the purpose of a kinyan, then obviously even the Rosh is going to be made that it creates a kinyan. So it's not machlekes. It's just a machlekes of reality. But it's not a machlekes of what's just the question, what's more common. That's what's the mashmos, the way it seems like in the name of the Michtam LeDavid, that the only shtori raya is a shtori. The Torah is talking about shtori raya would say that there was a kinyan agav sudar. So that's a raya. You can't be kaina with it because you're already kaina. Now, just an interesting point before we continue. If you look in the Sefer Vayilaket Yosef, which is similar to the Knesset Agdela, but the later generation, he brings a psak from the Maharil B'Ksav Yad. I don't know who is referring to the Maharils that we know. That he says that Hein the Beis Yosef. And there is Shari Raya. The Matarkas. The Vayilaket Yosef says it's not like it was, and therefore the dayan has to be very. Don't take anything for granted. You got to start doing your research. Kinyan could be Tashtaraya. Each place is different, and it's not Tazoi Pasha that you're just gonna say, well, like the Matashim says, say Kimli. One person is going to say Kimli one, one person is going to say Kimli the other way. It doesn't work like that. If it's, you have to do your research, if it's a shtar kinyan or a shtar raya. Now let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch. I already quoted you what the Shulchan Aruch says. And over there the Smeh Sifkat and Gimel says, we're going back to what the Beis Yosef, the shit of the Beis Yosef, that today's shtar is a shtar kinyan, not shtar raya. And he says the reason is very simple. Today's shtaris have lashon mechira in them. So obviously they're shtar kinyan. And the Smeh throws in a line, and even if it's written in lashon avar, that means past tense. That means what's the standard lashon that you see for shtaris mechiras in the beginning, the first Smeh, sadei zu mechura lecha. This field is being sold to you. Is sold to you. What happens if it's a shtar on the past? Mocharti lecha sadei zu. I sold you this field. The Smeh doesn't seem to have any problem with it. One way or the other, whether it's past tense, whether it's present tense, both of them work. Both of them are considered shtar kinyan.
Isn't that the whole word of shtar didan?
Huh?
Isn't started down that it's lashon of macharti, not mechura. That's the definition of the difference between ours and before, no?
You could argue that. There's a whole machlokes if that, which one, when does it work and which one, and when does it?
What pshat started down? What changed now? The lashon changed, no?
The lashon changed, yeah, but then it becomes...
Definitely it's going to be like
Shtari what?
Of the old stars, no?
If he writes mechura l'cha?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if he writes macharti l'cha, it's a shayla. If it's a shtari kinyan or shtari raya. So he says it doesn't make a difference which way you write it. The Smeh says it makes no difference if you write it mechura or write macharti. Both of them qualify as shtari kinyan. And then he continues, the Smeh continues and says that what it says that there's no kinyan with a shtar raya is talking about obviously in a place where the kinyan is trying to be made with a shtar, and you have a shtar which is only a shtar raya. But in a place where kinyan is kinyan kesef, and the shtar is taka only a raya, like I mentioned to you from the Marashal before, then even though the kinyan does not become complete when the money is transferred, the kinyan is done then, and the shtar becomes a raya, it already helps. The Erech HaShulchan goes through a discussion about the different shtaris. He brings the Baal HaItur and the Nimukei Yosef that they say that a shtar which is written in past tense, macharti l'cha, both of them effectuate the kinyan. And he Baal HaItur and the Nimukei Yosef, the Ramban, the Rameh, the Rashba, though you could claim, as only begeder of a hoidah, as Allah says, Ein lanu lazuz midivrei, and he quotes some of the Rishonim which take that position, and there's no difference, and they're all considered shtari kinyan. You can make a kinyan with such things. But the Ra'ah disagrees. The Marshal also disagrees, and the that only if you write mechura lecha and not any other way. And he says, now we have a machlekes. The Radbaz continues and he says, let's put this machlekes aside, let's go a step further. What happens if there's not a shtar that the moicher writes soda is a macharti lecha soda zu b'loshen hava? If you have a shtar where Eidim write, Anu mei Eidim she pleni and pleni machar soda zu le pleni and pleni. We saw that this field was sold to somebody else. Is that shtar could count as a shtar kinyan? Also only a shtar hoidah or maybe a shtar ayah. So he says you can medayik from the tshuva of one tshuva that Radbaz that it works, but lemaise from a different tshuva that Radbaz, or it's not a shtar kinyan, a shtar ayah. It's clear that from in Aliyah. Therefore, he says no. You can't both, whether it's a present or it's past, the same as a Smeh, that could work as a shtar kinyan. Huh? You can't go back on either of them. The question would be, what happens if there's money? If it's a shtar hoidah, then you can't argue that you never got the money. If it's a shtar kinyan, you could argue what the hemshech of Sif Dalet. If it's a shtar kinyan, you could argue, because you could say, well, maybe the shtar was written before. If it's a shtar there, you can't argue on it. What are you going to say, Amana? It's hard to say that. Shtar hoidah obviously always happens after the act. Shtar kinyan, you could say that b'mokim, that you write a shtar and then you give the money. Then I wrote the shtar and I was expecting the money and you walked off with the shtar. But if it's a shtar hoidah only always happens afterwards. Shtar hoidah is essentially stronger. But in a place where you koine with a shtar hoidah is not going to help you anything. It means if it's a place where you have to have a shtar, and the kinyan is done, the mokim shenahagu, that the kinyan is done with a shtar, then a shtar hoidah is not going to be enough to create a kinyan. It's going to be enough to prove that a kinyan was made. It's not going to be enough to prove that this is the kinyan. And when I transfer to you the shtar and you pick up the shtar, you kind of. or you sign the shtar. But the Mishpat Sholem, the Marsham, goes through this whole thing. It's a long Mishpat Sholem, and it seems like he says that seems like he's, after he goes through the whole sugi, it seems like he's machriya that no, that the loshin ovar, past tense, doesn't work. It only works as a shtar raya and not as a shtar kinyan. Now what happens if you write the shtar beloshin osid? Future tense. It's not written in the Siman. You write shtar in future tense. I'm going to sell you something. So this is not over here. It's in 50 Simanim from now, in Siman Reish Mem Hey, where over there is a discussion about kinyan, about etain. You have the first seif, I'm going to do something. That the first seif, the Mechaber brings, that if you say that you're going to do something, it doesn't work. And the Ramah over there, Machriya, that if you do something, it's not going, even a kinyan doesn't help a stam dvarim ba'alma. And then the Mechaber brings a second opinion, Yashayimrim, that if you made a kinyan on the etin, it does work. It does work. Comes the K'tzos and says, I don't understand how it works. The K'tzos on that Siman Reish Mem says, what does this kinyan create on the etin? Is it a transfer? A future transfer? That I made a kinyan now on the etin, the transfers? No, it doesn't make sense. Elamai, according to the second opinion, that a kinyan on etin works, it becomes a kinyan on the person. Shibud on the person, on the goof. Shibud on the body of the person. It goes the whole discussion if a person is, if his yodesh has to fulfill it or not. But the shibud on the body that he is forced to do what he committed to do. He made a kinyan to do something. But the transfer is not going to happen till later. So if you write a shtar which says etin, future tense, and you made a kinyan on that etin, obviously it's not going to transfer the property now, but it's going to create a shibud on the seller that when the time and the shtar comes, he's going to have to do a kinyan with you and sell you the property. However, if you look in Sif Dalad over there, if you say Me'achshav, it does work. A kinyan with etin on Me'achshav, it does work, and the Ramah does not mention anything on it, which obviously means that Ramah agrees with it. Pischi Tshuva in Sifkot Beis, back to our Siman, brings an interesting... Huh?
Etin is a Hebrew, nothing about it, he wrote it. No.
Yeah, so then there's... Yeah, but what happens if I write the piece of paper that I'm going to do something? It's the same thing.
Why? Then it's a kinyan shtar.
Why is there kinyan? I write a paper, I'm going to do something. It means nothing. It's just chayvus alasid. It means nothing. That's why you have the whole takanas hachmes fada. You have to do a tanai kafel. That if I'm committing to do this, and if I don't do it, kach v'kach. I'm committing not to do this, and if I do it, kach v'kach. Both ways. For a future, it's chayvus to have power. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It's in Chus Kedushin. In the middle, the first quarter of Even Ezer. It's an interesting base of Fra. Discusses what we could define as some of the more liberal attitudes, which is like this. If you look in the nuschos of selling houses that even the Nachas Shiva brings, when a couple lives, married couple, sells a house. I'm not talking about in today's day when it's written on both names. There's no names. Chazaka. Chazakas, and they both lived in the house for more than 3 years. Nobody disagrees it's theirs. It's not theirs. And they sell a house. The nusach of the shtar is mocharnu anu hazug. We, the couple, sold the house, and we, the couple, take upon ourselves a shibud and achrayus that if somebody's going to come and take it away from you, we're going to pay you. Comes the base of Ephraim and says, I don't understand. Not the first half, not the second half. What's mocharnu anu hazug? So we're talking about shtari kinyan, right? So that's the base of the Pesach Tshuva sticks it in over here. It's never Nazir, but he puts it in here. What's mocharnu anu hazug? The husband owns the property. The wife has a shibud ksuba on the property. but she doesn't have ownership in the property. So how can you say Mochan al Zug? So he says, okay, he gives a teretz. What's the teretz of the base of Rayim? Because,
It only really belongs to the husband.
it belongs to the husband. He worked for it.
It belongs to the wife.
She doesn't belong to him, but what she, yeah. And unless certain scenarios, so you have he says, there's a Rambam which says that if a woman sells something that belongs to the husband, and the husband knows about it and wasn't moiche, and agreed to it, and the sale goes through, which means that a wife has a right to sell her husband's property as long as he agrees to it. So therefore, she has a selling right. So if they wrote such a shtar, Mochan anu azug, and both of them signed in it, as if she sold it and the husband agreed to it, or he sold it and that's it. But that's the only reason it works. It makes no sense. It's going to be a shibud if she's not an owner. She takes no responsibility. Trying to say that you're going to collect from her, what are you going to collect from her? She has nothing to her name. All belongs to him. All she has is a ksubah. So he leaves it as tzarechil and he says, that's the shtar that's written, I don't know how to explain it. But let's move on to Sif Dalet. We'll go back to there's a Beis Yosef. Now Beis Yosef, the first Dalet of the Beis Yosef, Dalet 1, that comes before Gimel, is the one that's what the Beis Yosef quotes over here, but it's a little bit different than the Beis Yosef quotes. Over there, what happens if you wrote a shtar, the Lekeach has a shtar in his hands, and the Lekeach says, the field is mine, here is the shtar, and I paid everything. I'm clear, it's mine. The seller says, never got anything. So the Beis Yosef brings a Rabbeinu Yerucham. What does the Rabbeinu Yerucham says? Yesh Oimrim, that the Lekeach is trusted. And then the Rabbeinu Yerucham brings a Rashba, that it depends if it's a place where the minig is to write a shtar and then pay, then who has the burden of proof? The Lekeach has to prove that he paid. Even if the shtar has a lashon that says that the koine, that the moicher is moide, admits that he received the money, still not enough. Why? Because the minig and then get paid. Where the minig pay, then you. And the Beis Yosef brings the whole law of the Rashba from where the Rashba doesn't. Yosef seems to bring this whole Rashba to prove what Rabbeinu Yerucham quotes in his name, but everybody has issues with this Rashba. The Achrayim go through the whole discussion that if you read this carefully, this Rashba, it's lav dafka that it matches with what it says before. It's mashma from that Rashba that Lekeach is always trusted. That's when the Sivus gets into the Knesset. Everybody goes into a discussion about it. Yeah, we'll get to it soon. Then the Beis Yosef brings the Mordechai in the name of the Itur, that if Reuven bought a property from Shimon on somebody else's name, it means he bought it and he wrote Levi's name. Reuven bought it, paid for it, and wrote Levi's name. And Levi didn't tell him, buy me a property. Reuven bought it and put somebody else's name in it. Then Levi obviously acquires the property. And if Shimon wants to change his mind, he can't change his mind anymore, even though Reuven acted on his own behalf and not on behalf of Levi. Yeah, that's what it says. Now comes the Knesset Agdela. Yes, and this is what we'll put this Mordechai on the side. Let's go back to the original part. The Beis Yosef Paskins and Sif Dalet, exactly the same thing. That if it's a place where you're half of the story, if it's write a shtar, and the shtar of Haidah that the moicher is moide, that he received the money, and then the moicher says, I didn't get it, then the Lekeach is Ne'eman. That's how the Beis Yosef summarizes the Rashba. Comes the Knesset Agdela, of course Beis Yosef or his test, brings right away the Ra'anach, Chelek Aleph, Siman Samach Aleph, that I don't understand this Svara of the Beis Yosef. If it's a place where you first give money and then write a shtar, the lekeach should always be neman, regardless of what it says in the shtar, whether it says that he's moide, he received the money or not. The fact that this is a place where you first pay and then you receive a shtar is enough of a proof that the shtar was written after payment was done. So why do you need to do such a thing? And if it says a lashon hada in the shtar, difference does it make if the money you write and then pay, or pay and then write? It's lashon hada. What are you going to say? Shtar amana? Well, you can't say such a thing. So the l'chayra, base, he understands the Rashba that lekech is. If it's a place where and then you pay, and the shtar is a lashon hada, lekech is now. If it's a shtar where, if it's a place where you pay and then you write a shtar, it doesn't make a difference what it says in the shtar. Lekech is always ne'eman. Elamai. So what is this? He says, well, so what is the Rashba? Where would the Rashba say he's not ne'eman? The Ranach says a specific scenario where the shtar doesn't say how much money was received. It doesn't say. It's a place where you're supposed to give money first and then get the shtar. And now becomes an argument. He's supposed to pay the whole amount of money, otherwise there's no kinyan. All right? If it's not mipnei ra'asa, whatever it is, and there's ayal v'nafek, then there's no payment. There's no payment, no purchase. And the shtar, like we spoke about yesterday, and the shtar has a lashon. The money was given first, and then the shtar was written. And the shtar doesn't say how much money was paid, or it says that only part of the money was paid. And now in such a scenario, if the seller says I didn't get paid everything, then could be that the seller should be trusted. But no, the Ranach says no, even in such a case the Rashba is going to say that the lekeach is still trusted. Why? Because if it's a shtar which says that part of the money was paid and part of the money is still owed, doesn't say how much, it's a milva bal peh. Milva bal peh, the loive is ne'eman to say paraiti. So if the seller comes and says I paid the whole thing, he's still ne'eman. This is all from the Ranach. And the Knesset Gdela says, obviously this is not like Rabbeinu Yerucham. Because Rabbeinu Yerucham understood the Rashba that it depends on if your shtar is written first, and then money is given, then the buyer always has to prove. And if the money is given first, and then shtar is written, the seller has to prove. And he says, no, but on Lechem Rav, he writes like Rabbeinu Yerucham, and then the Knesset Gdela says, at the end of the day, I don't understand how it fits with Rabbeinu Yerucham, and it seems like he paskins like the Ranach understands the Rashba, which is not like the Beis Yosef paskins. Now and then another two interesting things in the Knesset Gdela goes Beis Yosef Oisutas. He says that if the seller claims he received money but not the whole amount of money, then and the buyer says no, I paid you the whole thing, the buyer is trusted. Also in the name of the Ranach, the same Ranach. And Oischof, he brings another piece from the same Ranach, that if Eidim come and say, we were there when the sale happened, and we tell you that the seller did not receive money, and then the buyer is asked, you paid him? He says, yeah. When did you pay him? He says the same date. So now he says he paid. There's two Eidim against him. So then he's not trusted. But if he says, I paid you, not on that date, I paid you a day before, I paid you a day after, then he is trusted. Because the Eidim are not makchishim. The Eidim are saying, on this day, he didn't pay. Taka true. The Ranach is based on this. He's ne'eman. If he says, I paid all the money on Chafel. Today's Chafel. And the Eidim say, on Chafel, we were there, you didn't pay a penny. Or you didn't pay the whole thing. Then he's not trusted. Let's go back to now, when Sif Daled, you have what I told you, what the Mechaber writes. The Mechaber writes very clearly, the way like that Rabbeinu Yerucham, and he adds even more into it, that if it's a place, the only time a lekeach is trusted is if it's a place where you pay and then get a shtar, and the shtar has a nusach haido. Comes the סימן and explains why. He says, let's think about it, the סימן says. If it's a place where you give money and then write a shtar, obviously the shtar is going to tell you that the money was given. Otherwise, it's a faulty shtar. It's a half a story. You have the shtar is going to have to. He says it's pashut the lashon of the shtar. The mechaber is just quoting to you what it should say in the shtar. And if not, there's a hereyas in the shtar. The shtar doesn't say money was given, and the shtar doesn't say the money was given. So it doesn't work. Elamai. So what's even more so? So the mechaber doesn't want to tell you only that. The mechaber is trying to tell you also another part, and that is if it's in a place where you write a shtar, and then you pay, and the shtar says that money was received, the haidah and the shtar money was received, we look at it as if this was written future tense. That means you wrote a shtar, understanding that when I'm going to give you the shtar to make the kinyan, you're going to pay me the money. And therefore, it's this shtar it can't be considered a raya that it was even given, because this place, the minig is a shtar is written first. So this shtar by definition can't. Therefore, you have to, because you write, you have to, or you give money and then you write a shtar, you have to put the same nusach also. And if not, it's a reis in the shtar. Now the shach obviously doesn't agree with this. Why? Because he tells you, go look in the Ranach. It gives you two places to look. The Marit and the Ranach. The Ranach we spoke about because we can say the Marit, you don't have to search it. It's in the Nesivis. Nesivis B'Urim of Cotton. Gimel brings the Marit. The Marit proves from the Rashba, takes apart the Rashba, and he proves not like the Mechaber understood the Rashba. The way the Marit understands the Rashba is, the Lekeach is always trusted. Why? Simple. Regardless of what's happening, the Moicher never has on the Lekeach anything more than the Tvias Mammon. The most he has is that you owe me money. He doesn't have a claim that there was no sale. You're talking about a place where you write a shtar for a kinyan. So what's the biggest claim that the Moicher could have? You didn't pay me anything. Fine. But it's not a claim on the kinyan, it's a claim on financials. Or you don't owe him anything. We said, like the Ranach has always trusted. When will the Ranach agree that the Lekech is not? If it's in a place where you do both. You have to do shtar and mammon. Not one, not only mammon, not only shtar. So we have both. In such a place where you have both, that's when the Rashba is moide that if you write a shtar first and then you give money, that the seller is trusted. Why? Because over there, where you have to have both to create a kinyan, the karka b'cheskas b'alai medes, and the Moicher says, a shtar was written. Yes, because that's the minhag. First you write a shtar. Money was not given, so the sale was never completed. And in this city, you have to have both. But if it's a place where you need only one of them, you don't need to. Lekech is always trusted. In a place where you only kind with a shtar, and there's no reason to mevatel the mekach, the lekech is always ne'eman. That's what the Marit says, the Shach brings. And the Sivis has a few questions on it, but then the Sivis actually paskins very similar to the Marit. And he explains like this. We're talking about a place where it's a shtar kinyan. The shtar kinyan says this field is being sold to you. So they mechurulcha, this field is sold to you. And the place is a place where the shtar makes the kinyan. So then, in such a place, the shtar is what makes the kinyan. He says, a similar idea to the Malik, but not exactly the same. Yeah, because over here he takes this, he says over here, the moicher could say, I gave you the shtar for the purpose of making a kinyan as a proof that it's going to happen. Occasion, you're supposed to give me the money afterwards. So therefore, I gave you the shtar, so you could make a case, then the moicher is trusted to say that he didn't receive payment. But if it's in a place where money is given after the shtar, and the shtar says those words like the mechaber says, or it's in a place where you do a different kinyan, not a kinyan shtar, not a kinyan kesem, make a kinyan agav sudar, and the shtar is used as a proof, shtar raya, whether it's a place where you make a kinyan through money and the shtar raya, or you make a kinyan through sudar and the shtar raya, then the lekeach is always trusted, says in the Sivas. Even if there's no lashon whatsoever that he received money, as long as it says that there was a kinyan made, so this is a raya that this field was sold to you with a kinyan, then he's trusted. Lekeach is always trusted. Why? Being that the lekeach does not need the shtar to make a kinyan, it makes no sense that the moicher should give the lekeach a shtar for no reason without getting paid. The only place where you could have a svara that the lekeach is going to, that the moicher is going to give the lekeach a shtar without getting paid is in a place where you have to make a kinyan with a shtar, and the minig is that the money comes afterwards. But in any other place where the minig is not to make a kinyan with the shtar, and the shtar is by definition a shtar raya, the moicher has no reason to give you the shtar unless you paid. So if you have a shtar in your hands, it's a raya that you paid. If you look at the Mishpat Shalom, I don't have enough time to go into it. He asks a bunch of questions on it, and but even after he asks all the questions, it seems like he's a machreya like the Nasivis. That the only place where the lekeach does not have ne'emanus is if it's in a place where the shtar is written for the purpose of a kinyan, a place where you only kinyan with a shtar, and the shtar was written before in a place where the shtar is written before money is given. The Divrei Mishpat paskins also like the Nasivis, but he goes into the whole explanation how the Rashba fits into that svara. Means he takes the Nasivis, started with the Mari to understand the Rashba and changed a few things into it, but doesn't say that that's how the Rashba holds. But the Divrei Mishpat says no. The Rashba will agree to all this. What's the svara? He says according to the Rashba, if there's another kinyan except for the shtar, the lekeach is always trusted to say paraiti. Yeah, why? Because he wouldn't have given the shtar without it. The lekeach is obviously trusted to say paraiti. It's a milva bal peh. If it's in a place and the lekeach didn't have a kinyan whatsoever, the lekeach doesn't have a kinyan, he only has a shtar in his hands. Then he says, according to the Rashba, what would you need? You need a shtar with a loshin hoidah that money was given. And if you don't have such a shtar, the moicher is trusted to say, I didn't get the money. But if it says in the money, and it's a place where you do both kinyanim, then he is trusted. But other than that, if it's a place where you do both, and the shtar doesn't say a loshin haidah that the money was received, and it's not a place where the money is given before, then karka becheskas b'aloi medas. That's also it's a little bit different than the Nasivis. If you want, there's a Mishpat Shalom, the Nasivis and the Divrei Mishpat. Each one explains it a little bit different, but it's not a shavah between all of them. That all of them are trying to figure out how the Beis Yosef ended up being so strict based on the Rabbeinu Yerucham, and the Rabbeinu Yerucham is based on the Rashba. And if you read the Rashba, it doesn't fit into what the Rabbeinu Yerucham said. With that, we conclude Siman Kuf Tzadik Aleph.